Hello everyone and welcome to Avantika Designeering series or ADS as we like to call it. Every week on Wednesday, we feature design and technology leaders who share their professional journey, their thoughts on their domain of work, and designeering where the world of design and engineering meet. Make sure you follow us on social media Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And with that, let's continue with your show.
In the ever changing atmosphere of the design world, designers need a learning mindset to adapt to user diversity and grow their user contexts. Having a good design team can significantly impact this growth by providing better understanding of human values and cultures. That in turn helps build empathy and understand the user's perspective, giving a better foresight for a design solution and driving innovation. However, how can designers keep up with the evolving user mindsets and create innovative experiences? To know more about this, in this episode, we interact with Navneet Nair, Director of Product Design at PhonePe. With over 2 decades of experience as a design leader, he holds expertise in user experience design, interaction design, user interface design, and product design. And that's why, on our journey of discovering designeering, we talked to him about unifying science in design. Hey, hello Navneet. Welcome to Avantika Designeering podcast series. It's an honor and pleasure to host you on our show today.
Thank you for having me here, Rohit. It's an honor at my end too.
Great. So, Navneet, as an ice breaking question, our thought frames the way we view the world. In fact, we need to be ambitious learner who wants insights as a mean to direct our actions. The question that I have for you is, how do we adopt a learning mentality to investigate the process more thoroughly to find the right design solution?
That's a great question, Rohit. I think one of the things that I've found really helps us grow is having a growth mindset. The fact that we are not done, and either way, whether it is in a positive way or negative way, if it's a negative way, it is that we have not reached a point yet, but we have a lot more scope for growth. The other way is that we can see that there is a lot more opportunity for us to grow. This is from the designer's own side, but from your point of view as an educator and my point of view as a manager of designers, the way I see things is that we need to be fundamentally aware that people have the potential to grow, and we should view it that way. And one of this is the Pygmalion effect, or the fact how when we view the uh, people in our teams to have a lot of potential for growth, they actually end up growing. And both from both sides, both from the point of view of the designers who want to grow, having a growth mindset, and from the people who are educating and managing them, having a view that designers have a lot more scope to grow. These are two things that help us grow, both from a point of view of the design team itself and from the point of view of the designer himself or herself.
Wow, Navneet, that's a beautiful perspective of bringing the world of education and the world of design education, in fact, coming together. I think that was a great insight. So, moving from our ice-breaking question to your journey, with over 2 decades of experience in the design industry, working with large technology giants like Google, Yahoo, to being a founding member of a design venture. Can you take us through your professional journey?
Sure, Rohit. Actually, to be honest, I have to admit that I have been fairly lucky. I have been lucky in the sense that I kind of got into design at the right time, and I've been lucky in the fact that I have been able to work with some really great people along the way. Uh, to start off with, I did my engineering, which is what most people in India do when they get fairly good marks in their 12th. I started my journey as a mechanical engineer, but maybe about 2 years into my engineering education, kind of realized that I wanted to do something a lot more creative. And at that time, I had a cousin who worked in advertising, and he introduced me to copywriting. I used to write fairly well, I still do. Uh, but then he encouraged me to take up writing as a professional job itself, and I found that I really enjoyed it. So 2 years into my engineering education, I actually started interning with advertising agencies. I worked with a couple of agencies, and by the time I got out of engineering, I applied only to advertising agencies. Got in at the fourth largest advertising agency in India, and worked there. When I started working there, something interesting happened. It was the year 1995, and the internet had just been introduced into it, and the office had a browser, a TCP/IP browser. Those days, it was a browser called Mosaic, which eventually became Netscape. And I was completely fascinated by the internet. I loved what was happening. I could understand the potential of the technology. And around a year later, there was this uh, software called Flash that was released by Macromedia, and I downloaded it and started playing around with it, and I was like completely smitten. So 4 years, I was playing around with the internet. I was making websites for clients in advertising agencies, but I was also doing my job as a writer, and I was dabbling around with design. uh, but 4 years into it, I said, I really want to take this up seriously, and I wanted to become a designer. So I did my master's in design at Sydney University, and from then on, I have been working with software products. I kind of got lucky break when I got called into working with a Bay Area startup that at that point was building software for converting PowerPoint into Flash and then doing web conferencing with it. It was really cutting edge technology, very interesting work that was happening. But it was also a lot of very interesting time. This was the year 2000, 2001, and the dot com bubble had just burst, and very interesting area time to be in the Bay Area. But that kind of got me triggered into taking design a lot more seriously. Around the same time, at Stanford, there was this professor named Terry Winograd who was putting up a lot of uh, uh, lectures online. He would call in people like Bill Buxton, Jeff Goldberg, and Jeff Johnson, and he would put in all of these really excellent talks by some of the pioneers of human computer interaction, and that really helped me learn a lot uh, about uh, interaction design. And in those days, the phrase itself was not coined. In fact, I was one of the first people in the group of first people who helped coin the word interaction design, because there was Don Norman who had used that word at one point of time. All of us decided, okay, yes, that's a word that makes a lot of sense to what we do. And I have been doing design, especially interaction design, from the point when the word and the labels were being coined. So in that way, I have been lucky. I have got the opportunity to work at Google and Yahoo, and had the opportunity to do that primarily because, to be frank, there were not many designers at that point of time. I don't know how I would perform today when there is uh, this huge burst of talent happening, especially in the young design community. Maybe I would not have been so lucky. But having been there, having gotten into it early, was fairly lucky. Uh, Also, did try to set up a design studio. It worked fairly well for some time, but it also gave me the opportunity to work with startups in India and help coach them. I think I worked at Google and Yahoo and got that sense of how multinationals think about design, and to take those learnings back and give it to the startups. in terms of, okay, how do you think about a design sprint, and how do you think about incorporating design thinking into your work process. Everything has been interesting, and like I said, a lot of it is luck, and I'm fairly grateful for having been there at the right time, in the right place.
That is really interesting and quite some journey in terms of the kind of organization, the kind of people, the kind of um, time that you've actually been in, and I think that's really exciting. In fact, Navneet, that leads me to my next question in terms of what you're doing currently. So, building and maintaining a team of designer isn't a straightforward task, and you've been building a team of designers at PhonePay from scratch. Uh, what are some of the obstacles to creating a team of talented budding designers?
So Rohit, when I started off in design, we used to fight about having a seat on the table. Today, I luckily we really don't have to fight for a seat on the table. The problem actually is filling that seat, finding the people who are able to come in and deliver design at scale with the maturity is something that is a problem that is pretty much plaguing the entire industry. What we find is that we do have designers. There is a lot of talent that is available, but what probably may be missing is the experience to go along with it, and the temperament to stick around and learn the craft, the art, and the science of design. What we do as designers is spend a lot of time thinking about the craft, and this is fairly evident in what a lot of people today are very interested in, and rightly so, in learning, how does Figma work, what are the new things that are happening out there. But we need to understand that design is only one third craft. The other two parts are the art and the science of it. Some people do spend a fair amount of time on the art, but I think what is clearly lacking today is the science of design, wherein why are we doing something, what is the core reason behind it, are we studying it, are we making enough hypotheses out of it, are we validating those hypotheses. These are all things that are required for us to mature as an industry itself. And what I find the most difficult is filling in with the team with designers who are mature enough to understand all the three facets and bring in a complete holistic view to design. We do have a lot of great universities like yours coming up, and trying to fill in the number of new designers who are coming in. But we also need those designers to work with industry experts who have been in the field for a long time and grow their, not just their craft but also the art and the science, and become completely holistic designers who are then earning the seat on the table, and are able to make solid decisions while sitting over there.
Hey, did you know PhonePay won the best mobile payment product category and the technology category at the IAMAI India Digital Awards 2020 for second year in a row? Wow, I love the phrase and the way you described it, which is earning the seat on the table, and that's so relevant. In fact, a lot of us, in the entire spree of hiring, in the entire spree of building the team and managing multitasking between work and other priorities, actually land up missing this point in practice, and it's so beautiful to actually hear about it from you. While we are talking about PhonePay, Navneet, PhonePay is India's most exciting fintech startup with a goal to make digital payments so easy, safe, and universally accepted that people never feel the need to carry cash or cards again. Can you tell us how design has impacted the value proposition of the product?
Sure, Rohit. That's a great question to ask, because we as designers are always thinking about how we impact the value proposition. And what I like to believe is that designers actually should not be too worried about creating impact on the value proposition, because if the things are done right, you will be automatically doing that. And the way to do that right is to start with the value that you want to create. So at PhonePe, we start fairly heavily with the value that we want to create, which is basically to make sure that we are inclusively taking all of India towards progress on their financial journey. And we do that by making transactions as easy as possible. With this value and vision statement that we have in mind, when we approach design in a way that uh, all the decisions that we make, all the design decisions, all the product decisions, and all the business decisions that we take are aligned to the value, we are automatically delivering a beautiful value proposition for the user. A lot of this comes from very early on, the way Steve Jobs used to handle the vision at Apple when he came back in after his small hiatus at Next. He came in and said, "Why does Apple exist as a company?" And his answer was that Apple exists to enable change makers to make the change, and that is where the whole Think Different campaign came in. And the whole value that Apple stood for is that they want to enable people who think that they can make a difference, to help them make that difference. And at PhonePe, we have a similar value to make sure that people are progressing forward on their financial journey. And we are doing that by making transactions as simple as possible. So when we have that value ingrained in all of us, both not just the design team, but the engineering team and the business teams and the product team, what we find is that all of us are speaking the same language. There is no difference in the way that somebody is thinking about a particular product or a feature, because we all agree on that particular core value. And this is something that is important, and something that we have worked fairly hard at PhonePe to make sure our values and our vision is fairly clear. And what we derive from that is this coherent vision based on which we are able to build the product and deliver the value proposition itself.
Wow, interesting. And I think it's very inspiring. It's very important for teams to realize the organization vision and everyone actually working towards that vision. And I think the very few companies who actually work towards that, especially Indian companies. Otherwise, in most of the cases, what we see is vision statements just land up becoming part of the business plan or somewhere on the notice board of offices. But internalizing the vision and everyone working towards it is absolutely beauty.
Absolutely true.
PhonePe seeks to meet another billion people with such a broad client base and diversity with a varied community of clients. In fact, is a very challenging thing for any designer, since the information to be shared with multiple buyers is distinct and ultimately keeps the customer at the forefront of every developmental aspect. The question that I have for you, Davneet, is how do you ensure a balance between flexibility and information density?
Absolutely, Rohit. So, doing that is not easy, and to make sure that we are able to deliver on that, what we have done is we have codified our design principles very clearly. These design principles start off with three universal principles. The first one is to be clear, is to be as obvious and intuitive as possible, both in terms of the visual hierarchy and the information categorization, so that this reduces the amount of cognitive overload that users have to face. The second thing is to be consistent in the way we do. So, using the correct patterns in the correct place, being very consistent, amplifying the predictability and familiarity of the product. And the last and most important one is to just to be simple, and simple as much as possible, so that we are designing for the lowest common denominator. When we are talking about 250 million plus registered users on our platform, and about 100 million of them using it every month, we really cannot be choosy and selective about who are the people that we are designing for. So we have to make sure that we are designing for the lowest common denominator. On top of that, having the users trust us is absolutely imperative. So to do that, we are very transparent in everything that we do. We let the user be in control and take responsibility where possible, so that we can help the user come out of situations. And this also helps us take the user from just being competent to being masters, to being more proficient. And by showing users that there is this growth that is happening, this helps us take the users one step further, and thereby allowing us to grow the user experience as our user base is growing. So this is the consistent journey that we have thought out, and this is the principles based on which we design our product. And I feel this helps us, no matter who we are building for, whether it is somebody in a tier two a city, or a tier two town, or one of the next billion users out there.
In fact, sticking to that theme, Navneet, fintech is transforming how financial services are being packaged and delivered to consumers from an experience, access, and cost saving perspective. They require a thorough understanding of business, technology process, and a great deal of analysis and testing with users. The question that I have for you is, what are some of the effective fintech UX principles and opportunities that designers must be aware of?
Right. I did touch upon some of the core principles that we have at PhonePe, which is the whole point of being clear, consistent, and simple. But one of the core underlying things is for us to move the users from competence to proficiency, which primarily is to say that users are able to see growth in themselves by using our products. And that is something that we try to do. This is something that I have learned from a book by Kathy Sierra, which basically talks about the fact that nobody buys a software product because the product is good. They buy a software product because the product makes them better at what they do. And this is something that we completely believe in at PhonePe, and we want the users of our platform to become better at whatever it is that they do, whether it is making the right financial decision, or making payments as quickly as they could, and saving money while doing so. So that is the core principle that I see, which would help us, but also would help a lot of other products in similar situations, help deliver a lot of value for the users.
In fact, while you were talking about, taking an inspiration from a book and the other elements, one of the other thoughts that I was thinking about at the same time was about the investigative phase. In fact, among all stages of problem solving, the investigative phase is the most crucial because it reveals how to approach design problem itself. The question that I have for you, Dampit, is how can designers investigate and recognize human values and cultures, diversity, helping in the right direction towards creating sustainable solution? I mean, we see you practicing the same at PhonePe with companies like Google, Yahoo. You would have experienced some of these aspects. So the question is, how do you understand and recognize some of these things?
Right. So it's absolutely true that designers understand the users, and the best way to develop this empathetic understanding of the user is through contact. And one of the things that we need to do is probably do some sort of a contextual study of how users are performing what they're doing. However, what we have found is that once in 100 years, there is a situation that makes it difficult for us to do. This pandemic is one of those situations, and what we find is that it is difficult for us to go down and meet those users. In this situation, what we have found useful is sometimes to use visualization techniques that can help us gain empathy without actually having that contact. So it is definitely something that we need to start uh, putting into place. And I have written a couple of articles where you can understand how to develop empathy without necessarily being in first hand contact. There's absolutely no uh, other way of doing it. You need to have first hand contact as the best possible way of developing empathy. But in case you don't have that, what we can do is we can visualize our users to kind of be uh, very close to us, people who we are kind of like our friends, and think about us developing users features for our friends itself. How would we do that? How would we do that for, let's say, our parents or our siblings? And based on that, we can actually think about them as real users and then start developing for them. And this helps us develop empathy for the user. So it, while it is not a replacement for the investigative contextual analysis that is required, I think in this pandemic we do need to make some changes and still gain user empathy. And this is one way that we can do that.
Hey, did you know in January 2020, PhonePe launched the first of its kind digital ATM in India? PhonePe ATM that allows neighborhood Kirana stores to dispense cash in real time to its customers. Interesting. In fact, Navneet, while you spoke about diversity among the users, I again come back to mobile applications. And when it comes to designing them, simplicity is good and complexity is always bad, which is a widely held belief in the industry. In fact, designers treat mobile and desktop as two different creatures with opposing needs. However, when we look at it from the user's intent, it doesn't drastically change whether they are using their applications or website. My question is, can complexity in applications provide a good user experience? And how can designers embrace complexity while designing applications in such a way that it's not complicated?
Okay, now that's a complicated question. So I like how Einstein puts it. You know, everything should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. And the same is true for user experience. You know, as a designer, we definitely strive for simplicity wherever possible. But then making things too simple can also be an issue. For example, if you're designing an interface for trading stocks, now there is a certain amount of complexity that a seasoned stock trader is used to. And when we are providing that, there are certain controls that they expect out of the interface. It's almost like, you know, the pilots are used to the complexity of the cockpit of an aircraft. But then if you were to allow normal users to purchase stocks, they may not need that set of complexity. For example, the seasoned trader is used to thinking of stocks in the number of stocks they buy, whereas a normal user might be thinking only, oh, I have so much of money to invest. And this subtle difference tells you that there is no one way of looking at it. So when we look at complexity or simplicity, in fact, there is no one way of looking at it. You have to look at it from where the user is coming in from, and then design accordingly. Some people do need the complexity, people cannot deal with that complexity. And we as designers need to understand who is the user coming in and then provide that thing accordingly. So sometimes that complexity is required because that user expects that complexity. And while you can make it simple within that, what you're doing is you're giving the right set of controls. I'm not saying that aircraft cockpits are probably the best designs, and there would probably be a company like Tesla which will come in and reform everything. And in fact, SpaceX has done it with the spacecraft. I'm sure something will happen with aircrafts as well. But then pilots do need control, and that is what a professional would need. And while we are talking about complexity, I think it is not really complexity, but it is about how much control someone needs. And that does introduce complexity, but at the same time, we can still strive for what is the best optimum design that we can do for that particular user. So again, like I was saying, it is completely contextual as to who the user is, and we as designers need to be able to deliver the right interface for that.
Interesting, Navneet. And while in our conversation we've delved into the why and what part of it, my next question is around the how part of it. Design sprints are often considered as a superpower. It bypasses months of discussion by 1 week of collaboration, design thinking, and consumer centric decision making. But for design problems that are very complex or involve a high level of strategy, the design sprint falls short as a successful method. The question that I have for you is, what are the other design approaches that designers can follow to solve business challenges on a strategic level?
Sure, Rohit. So, design sprint actually was never meant to be a panacea. In fact, most people today don't really know how to run a design sprint. And this just ends up creating a lot of mediocre solutions. And people use the whole design thinking process as an excuse to come up for mediocrity. And this is why some designers like Natasha Jen has gone so far to call design thinking as bullshit. But that is not true. In fact, the process is only as good as the person who uses it. So in the hands of an expert, it can actually produce wonders, but in the wrong hands, it can produce disaster. So when we are doing design, we should not look at all of these tools as saying they are the means. So they are just tools that will help you get to what the end outcome is. And while design sprint works really well when you have a small problem and you want to reach to a solution in a time frame, at the same time be inclusive in the process so that you can get as many people to contribute to that process. Sometimes there are other things that can help in. For example, you could do quick prototyping and come up with different solutions, or you could basically have a design, run number of crit sessions around along with other people, come to that solution. Or you could do generative design, have people come in and talk about what they want to do. So there are number of tools that is available to us as designers, and design sprint is just one of them. And as designers, I think we should learn a lot more about what are the tools that are available to us and start using them in the appropriate manner at the appropriate time.
That's well said. And moving from there, Navneet, let's talk about blended the world of technology in all of this. Innovation has not always been perceived as a technological and commercial thing. Its foundation serves as mechanisms for the industry as well as technology. The question is, how do we combine concept of knowledge, technology, viability, and market policy to accelerate innovation?
Sure, Rohit. So, Rohit, innovation is said to have three spokes to it. It's supposed to have the business aspect to it. There is a technology that needs the validation, and there is also the user's requirements that need to be met. So, this basically means that innovation is said to be this intersection between viability, feasibility, and desirability. However, to be frank, that's a very simplistic look at innovation. True innovation is a very iterative process. You basically want to build on things that have already been built, and you may need to at times borrow from things that are either been built in the same field or even in parallel fields, and say, okay, this is something that was done somewhere else, and I'm just borrowing it from there. In fact, Isaac Newton said it very well. I have seen further by standing on the shoulder of giants. And as designers, that is what we need to do. We need to stand on the shoulders of giants who have already been there, and look at what is out there, and be open and receptive to all sorts of ideas, and maybe have serendipity and gratitude as well thrown into the mixture, which all of it together kind of works towards innovation. And to say that I have the answer to innovation and doing this will lead to innovation. I think I will be saying too much. I think we need to understand that innovation cannot be codified into a single process. It happens over time, and it happens with the help of us working together uh, and working along with others and seeing what others have done and then imbibing that into us as well.
Beautifully put, in terms of blending all of these worlds together. And that brings me, Navneet, to my last question. That at Avantika University, we coined this term called as designeering, which is the base ideology and philosophy on which we operate. The question that I have for you is, do you see design and technology blend in your field and your process? And what's your validation on this concept and philosophy?
Absolutely. I don't think we need to start thinking of design as a vertical. Design is a horizontal. Uh, Design needs to be present in absolutely everything that we do, whether it is you are uh, doing software design, you're doing industrial design, or you might be even doing, let's say, hotel management, and that also needs design as part of it. So I think design needs to be start looked at as a horizontal function. And right now, maybe what you're looking at is engineering and design engineering. Designeering is a wonderful way of saying, okay, I am bringing the horizontal aspect of design into engineering. And especially with technology, the way things are progressing, especially with the way computers are progressing, we are seeing a lot more power being given to the computers. I mean, Moore's law is showing no signs of abating, and very soon we will have machine learning and artificial intelligence, which are reaching super intelligence level kind of AGI kind of levels at any point of time. So, with that set in place, what is going to be the role of not just designers or engineers, but all of us as a whole? So we need to start thinking about how we will be delivering for the next generation, which is probably going to come up very soon. And having all of these horizontals, design being one of them, I would say ethics being another one, and even philosophy being a one more layer, which all are horizontal things that need to be taught at each and every level, right from school. And uh, this is just one aspect of it. I hope more and more universities will start thinking about these holistically and not just approach education in silos, saying that I'm going to create engineers or I'm going to create accountants in my college or in my university, but rather have this holistic uh, leaders for tomorrow that can be created by blending together of all of these kind of fields that are out there.
Wow, that was an interesting conversation with you, Navneet. Thank you so much for joining us on Avantika Designeering podcast series. I'm sure that there's a lot of learning for all our listeners out there. And thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Rohit. It was a pleasure.
Hey there, we hope you enjoyed our show. Do write to us on ads@avantika.edu.in. We look forward to your opinions, feedbacks, and suggestions of speakers you would like us to host on this show. Do tune in our channel next week on Wednesday for a new story on Hubhopper or wherever you get your podcast from. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter.